Welcome to the Southeast Retirement Planners podcast, where we will go beyond the balance sheet with our guests, not only to share from our personal experience as financial advisors of over 25 plus years, but also to learn from our guests about the issues and topics that are important to them. Our firm specializes in taking care of the financial plans for individuals and small businesses by helping our clients identify their individual goals and taking a conservative and ongoing approach to helping accomplish them. We are located in Hickory, North Carolina, and look forward to continuing to serve our clients and our community. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to another episode of the SRP podcast with Southeast Retirement Planners. Thankful to be here again with another guest. Just as a reminder, for those of you that are tuning in on one of our audio channels or on our YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe. That really kind of helps us figure out who's watching and who's listening and be able to put more content together to suit our listeners and our viewers, and really just want to bring more content to you from our community as well. So you can find out any information you need on us at our website, www.seretirementplanners.com. And there's a section in there for our podcast link as well. So be sure to check that out. Find us on YouTube and Spotify and those sorts of things, and like and subscribe. So excited about our guest today. Good friend of mine, John Birk, is joining us today. John, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to it.
Yeah. So John and I have gotten to know each other pretty well over the last couple of years, and he is a man of a very diverse background and a lot of interesting things. And one of the things, several of the things that he's involved in really kind of hit close to home with a manufacturing company here in the Catawba Valley, and some pretty unique products. And I've been able to go over there and tour the facility, and it's an impressive thing. So we'll get to that at some point. But I guess first of all, let's see, you're married, 2 kids. Our kids get along and live kind of around the corner from each other.
Yep.
When did you move to the area?
3 years ago, Thanksgiving.
Okay. 2017.
2017.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a partner in a manufacturing company here in town, but before that, a tall drink of water from Texas. So,
yep, 7 foot.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. So, to give me a little bit about your business background and kind of how you got into manufacturing, I guess.
Well, it's actually quite a bit of it's a long story, to be real honest, but in 1995, I decided I wanted to go to Texas Tech University in Lubbock, and went to Tech and kind of did some things, where you stayed on campus the first year, and I really wasn't branching out much then. But then after I started moving off campus, I decided that, just hanging around and doing homework is not the best thing. So I decided to go out and find me a job and helped a guy actually build a bar that's still there, and then worked at the bar for about 3 weeks and realized that that's probably not the best plan for the future. And had a very good friend of mine that I hunted with a lot there, and we were always working in this friend of his machine shop doing some odds and ends stuff. He was just helping him after work, and next thing you know, they were shorthanded and asked me to come work in the machine shop, and I was interested in it, and started there in 96 and worked in the machine shop ever since to now. In 2001, I graduated, and these gentlemen that we were actually making parts for, I really wanted to work with these guys. I don't know why. There was just a guy by the name of Jerry Hall and Bob Helmuth, and their company was J&B, Jerry and Bob. Mm-hmm. And 2002, I just walked in their office, 2001, and said, hey, I want to come do sales with you guys and learned kind of the different side of the business. They were the sales side, so they were brokering a lot of manufactured parts. We were actually the manufacturer they were buying them from. And they called me about 3 weeks later and said, come in and talk to us. And they said, hey, why don't you put a machine shop in for us, because we're having trouble, because I'd actually left the machine shop I started with and went to another one because, back then the guy paid you $2 more. I'm out of here. My loyalty was...
All right, so when you're at a machine, I don't know. You grew up in Texas and were involved in a lot of outdoor stuff and hands-on type work and all that stuff for a long time. What a machine shop means different things to me. What was that like? What were you actually doing in there?
So there we were actually cutting all metal parts. So we were taking castings and turning them into hubs for like floor cleaning equipment.
Okay.
And then we'd paint them, and then might even have to come back and have like a finish operation done to them. And so it was a little intriguing to me where, I grew up as a golfer. Family wasn't in manufacturing. My grandfather owned a fast food burger joint in El Paso, and my dad was a golf pro. And so it was completely new to me. And for some reason, I just always liked being outside and working with my hands and things of that nature. And so the first time I saw a drawing and, really kind of understood it with tolerancing, the guy kind of really put it the best way. He says, your human hair is 0.003 of an inch in diameter, and the tolerance we're holding is 6 times less than that on this part. And so that kind of grabbed a hold of me like, wow, we're actually machining and cutting metal to that.
It's important.
It's that important, whether it can be life and limb or just a possible recall or it just doesn't work. So processes and everything to make sure that occurs was, a big deal to me and kind of what kind of stuck with me. Now, from what we were doing, the gentleman that actually hired me originally kind of put me on the manual side. So like when I say the manual side, you're actually cranking handles and making a piece of steel or a part out of a piece of steel by manually moving the machine and setting up fixtures and, where you can cut different angles and holes and things of that nature. And then moved me into the CNC world. So the CNC world is computer numerically controlled, which is something you program. It's got servos in it. The machine moves, brings the tool down.
It's like a giant robotic drill bit.
It's a giant robotic drill bit.
Yeah,
and
which you have a bunch of those in your shop now.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. So we started a machine shop, and they were fortunate enough to say, hey, if it works, then, you're going to be our exit plan. And that obviously really excited me. And so we started with one 9,000 square foot building and grew it to right at 70,000 square feet. And I purchased those gentlemen out, or completely purchased them out started it in 2011. We lost Bob, unfortunately, in 2008 to cancer. And so Jerry and I kind of really had to bear down because he managed a lot of our largest customers. And so I kind of had to help take part of that over as well as Jerry. And I've had it with another partner. I do have another partner in Lubbock. But we bought the company in 2011 totally. And so
in 2011, how old were you?
No, excuse me, 2012. I was 32.
I mean, that's a lot of confidence to come from working in the machine shop to building the machine shop internally for J&B, and then now owning the company at 32.
Mm-hmm.
So pressure, it seems like you're a detail-oriented guy, you're a process-oriented guy.
Yeah, it was...
Didn't scare you off?
No, not at all. No, I wanted to be... I did not want to work for anybody anymore. So this was my opportunity. It didn't matter what it was going to take. I was going to make sure it worked. And so, not only the manufacturing side of it was big, but, we actually were really involved, or really needed to get involved internationally because, unfortunately, the U.S. started losing 1 to 2 foundries a week. And when I mean foundries, you're pouring molten steel into a mold to make a part that might make this iPhone.
Yeah.
And then you machine it. And everything was moving offshore, whether it was environmental or, there's a gamut of reasons of why everything started closing in the United States and moving to Asia and other parts of the world. And actually in 2003 was my first trip. I just met this guy and picked my bags up and flew into Shanghai. And really funny story on that was I'd never used a travel agent before. And he says, use this lady. She was a Chinese lady in San Francisco. She sends me my tickets. She sends me my second set of tickets, said, "Hey, it's changed." Well, I didn't notice it, but I actually didn't realize there was 2 airports in Shanghai. So the gentleman that's picking me up is at the new airport, which is almost about an hour and 20 minutes away from the other one.
Okay.
Well, I fly into the old one, not knowing, and he thinks I'm going into the other one. So now I'm in the middle of Shanghai in 2003 with a BlackBerry that doesn't work.
A BlackBerry, of course.
Yeah, and wondering which hotel I was going to go to and how I was going to figure out how to fly back.
Not a lot of help.
Not a lot of help
coming your way when you land in the old airport in Shanghai.
Yeah, I knew it was a little different. I mean, when all of a sudden there's like frozen fish and stuff coming out with your luggage, I was like,
"Oh, you're kidding me!"
Yeah, I was like, "Okay, well, this doesn't seem right." But then you get out and there's just a mob of people. Can I get you a hotel? Can I get you a taxi? Yada yada yada, and pretty overwhelming. But
well, it couldn't have been that bad of an experience. I mean, you're getting international exposure.
Oh, I got it right out the bat.
But then you didn't stop going.
No, I didn't.
You moved your whole family there.
I did. I moved my whole family there. Yep.
So when was that?
It's funny. I got a deal on Facebook today. 8 years ago, Ryan and Blake we put them in a Chinese school.
I saw that picture.
And that was 2013.
Okay.
So
how long did you live there?
Right at about 5 months.
Okay.
And so what we were trying to create was we were just buying a lot of product out of China at that time and bringing it in, fully machined, even in some respects. But we were also buying materials because you couldn't get certain materials anymore in the United States. Like big forgings and things of that nature. It's a thing of the past here. But I wanted to have control, and a lot of my customer base wanted me to have control, and by having control means you need to have your own manufacturing plant. And we were getting big enough into China. That we were doing it. So I met a gentleman over there who was from Canada, and he had a Chinese partner. And we had decided months ago to start this. But with the Chinese, it's not like you just go call your lawyer and say, "Hey, I need this LLC," and 3 days later, off you go. It literally takes probably 3 to 4 months. I mean, it's paperwork and banking So we started a company called GMI in 2013, got it up and running, bought the same exact equipment I had in my Lubbock plant so we could share between programs and things of that nature.
All that kind of stuff.
All the engineering support, quality control. And during that whole process is when we were living there. So we Neely and the 2 kids were over there. We actually put them in a school where they taught half English, half Chinese, and the kids were actually speaking Chinese when they left pretty well. And we tried to keep that going when we moved back to Texas and put them in private lessons, and it just, when you don't speak it every day, it's kind of hard to continue that.
Yeah,
so we started that, and I ended up buying GMI wholly in 2015 or 14 or 15. They got in a little bit of a jam and basically helped me get that company bought. So I now own 100% wholly owned foreign enterprise, which is really impossible unless you have something like that occur in China.
Okay.
And so my Texas plant owns it. So it is a complete separate entity, but you have to have a U.S. company tied to it. So we've had that ever since. It's done very well. We've built from medical devices to parts for oil and gas, mining, and that's really what it's there for. It was just to be able to get into the depths of the raw material side of the world. And
so how do you even, I mean, when I think about machining and doing that kind of manufacturing, when you go from medical device stuff to oil and gas stuff, like that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
How do you, I mean, is there a threshold of what it is you have proficiency in, or is it just all the little, nooks and crannies and the bits and pieces that go into certain types of machinery? You can just really do it whatever's required.
Well, that's a great question, because originally we were just what I would call industrial machining manufacturing. So if it wasn't something steel, aluminum, we weren't really into the plastics, rubber, things like that.
Okay.
But, with the medical device, how some of your closest friends are, hey, I've got this interest. can you help me out? And next thing you know, we're building a medical device in China, getting FDA approval. We've never done that. We've never been through that. It was the most painstaking process we have ever done. Getting FDA approvals, I mean, I think it'd be cheaper to send a satellite into outer space.
Getting FDA approval on a medical device from a manufacturing company that works with oil and gas parts.
In China.
In China.
Yeah, so that was fun. Then after that, I met a gentleman in Texas where we basically bought the rights to an optic mount. So anything that you mount a scope to on a rifle or a red dot or even to a pistol, we bought the rights to utilize some of his IP. And I met a gentleman by the name of Pat Harrigan in the LA airport to go look at acquiring U.S. Optics. And Pat and I hit it off very well. It's funny. We decided kind of that day that we wanted to continue that, knew each other 24 hours, had one meal together, and off we go. I go back to Texas. He comes back to Fayetteville, North Carolina. Pat spent quite a bit of time in the Army, graduated from West Point, and he had just got out. And funny thing was, him and his wife actually had a business while he was still in the military. So anyways, he had a company called Critical Capabilities. I started the brand Zero Delta. We had another partner involved, and basically we decided, hey, we had these different ideas, kind of this whole Buy America stuff that was going on, and wanted to do some different things that would help, and decided let's all put them together. And the reason why we were in North Carolina was, one, Pat was already here in Fayetteville.
Right.
And two, at that time, there wasn't really a whole lot of commercial real estate available in Texas without having to build something. And we didn't want to wait.
So you go from the manufacturing company that you now own at that time. You now became the sole owner. Foreign enterprise, manufacturing all these different, from medical devices to parts and whatever for oil and gas pipelines. And then all of a sudden you get suddenly into firearms and mounts. Like, I mean, is that?
It's all the same. It was just, so that's a great question too. We consider ourselves an OEM manufacturer. So what I mean by OEM is customer XYZ comes to me with blueprints and says, hey, we need you to help us find, either source it or manufacture in your plant in Lubbock or manufacture in China or wherever.
Same thing the medical device guy did.
Kind of the same thing. But this is what we've
schematics
always
of what
done.
We want to do.
Yep.
Can you guys build this?
Actually,
and you go, probably.
Actually, the medical device, we actually did the entire engineering ourselves. It was.
It was just an idea?
It was an idea that somebody had made. They acquired some IP. They got a patent on it. It was really cool, but it wasn't. It was a concept.
Okay.
And we basically did the engineering from the ground up on that. So completely kind of almost redesigned the whole thing, built all the drawings for it, built all the molds for it, ended up building prototypes. It worked, continued to base production. And, honestly, it kind of paused there for a little bit. Now it's really picked back up, obviously, with everything going on with the pandemic, because the device actually destroys sharps on a needle. So you can imagine how many shots are given out right now.
Yeah.
And it's actually the device called Sharps Terminator. So basically, the whole concept was, in the United States, there's the hospitals pay so much if you have an accidental stick. And so, let's just say I'm giving you a shot. The nurse behind me, I turn around to go to the Sharps box and forget to put the cap on.
Right.
And, happen to have an incident where she have a stick. And with insurance and all the testing and everything goes involved, plus then the employer really can't work because they could have been infected with knows what the patient had going on. And so the whole concept was it's a battery-powered device. You give yourself a shot. You put it in this. It burns the sharp completely off and then cuts it off, where when you pull it back out, all you have is a piece of plastic in your hand.
Really?
And so that's what it does. And it's actually been really difficult to get everybody to understand how, the benefits to it. But it's taken off in a lot of the foreign countries.
Okay. Where you don't have to do the same disposal process or procedure.
Yeah.
In the same kind of way, I guess.
Correct. And the guys that actually put it all together, the friends of mine, they kind of looked at it not only from a business per opportunity, but even from a humanitarian side of it.
Sure.
So given various shots and wherever, Africa or wherever, and kids are playing in needles with, in the trash cans because they have no regulation to dispose of that. It was kind of those guys were really kind of wanting to get involved with that side of it too. So it was it kind of tugged at the heartstrings a little bit, but it was also a business venture.
So when you go from, working in the manufacturing and the machining plant, and then all that stuff starts to escalate for you personally and for the business that you now own, what did that look like in terms of like management structure, number of employees? Like, how do you, if you're going to start a company from the ground up, how do you even begin to establish sort of what it is? I mean, and I'm sure it's, the world needs ditch diggers too, right? I mean, some of it is just, you just do what you need to do,
right? But
you're also building a family organization in a way that's got your name on it.
Yep.
How do you do that?
Well, you can always plan. The best plan is always, the best thing to have. But I've noticed 90% of the time when it's in manufacturing, that plan is going to change daily. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it's pushed by your customer, where, it's the customer is saying, hey, our business is going through the roof. We've gone from using 200 pieces a month to 2,000 pieces a month, and you don't really want competition coming in and taking that away from you. So a lot of it was forced by what the customer wanted. And so, we kind of had a plan as far as how we wanted to grow, and I'm kind of talking more towards the Texas side of it. And we just, really the customer is what pushed it. And so from a management perspective, you definitely had our issues, where we were going 100 miles an hour with, 80 mile an hour worth of people and equipment and things of that nature. But probably the best thing we did was really kind of sit down and create a high level, kind of almost an executive staff, from manufacturing manager to HR manager to quality manager, where everybody reported direct and then everybody reported up. And finding those key people was not easy, but once we did, it really helped the organization. Rather than me, and that was probably the hardest thing for me, was letting some of that go, especially in the machine shop. I was on the floor all day, every day, talking to customers, doing it all. But for me to say, okay, now this is your baby, that was tough. And I kind of had to talk to everybody and say, you guys are just going to have to bear with me.
Sure.
I know there's going to be some headbutting here, but you got to understand, this is, I helped put that conduit in the air.
Well, what I was going to, so it's got to be unusual. I mean, and we'll get, I want to get to Zero Delta and US Optics here, but it's got to be unusual to have that kind of an organization. Now, a foreign organization as well, where the guy in charge of it used to do that,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, is that? I would assume that's a little bit unique, where you have the experience, where you know exactly what it takes from zero to finished.
Yep,
and you've done all that work on your own.
Well, I was a little fortunate too, where my younger brother decided to also come to Texas Tech, and so I didn't let him, kind of sit around either, nor did he want to. And so next thing you know, he was in the machine shop. Uh-huh. And his I started him from the very bottom, running the saw, deburring parts, the dirtiest part of the business. And
you do that long enough, you realize I'd rather work for myself.
Yeah,
or keep doing this.
Or
right.
I'd really like to run that machine over there than this.
Right.
It's a little cleaner, a little more organized. And he got his degree in finance and accounting, and we got a really big contract, and my brother was actually working for a company in El Paso, a big law accounting firm, and I drove direct to Fredericksburg, Texas. I knew exactly where he was, and said, "This is what's occurred. You need to come work for me like tomorrow." And obviously, we went through the whole where he gave his notice and things of that nature. But having your brother there, and him kind of going through the machine shop and understanding it, looking at blueprints, understanding processes and controls and quality and things of that nature, and now he runs the whole organization. So from that side of it, that made it a little bit easier for me to start out here as well, or leave that company. Was that I partner there who's really mainly in the ERP IT side of it, and then my brother was manufacturing, sales, processes, things of that nature. And so we had a good team there. It was still difficult to just kind of pick up and say see you guys later and start this out here, but we did, and it's obviously worked. And
so how did you cross, and maybe it's not much of a crossover from the manufacturing you were doing to now firearms? And I know that then the partnership with US Optics came in around the same time. Mm-hmm. So how did you go from what you were doing to Zero Delta?
Actually, US Optics was first.
Okay.
So we acquired US Optics first, and
because they were California, then Montana.
Yeah, Brea, California is where they were. It's a 25-year-old company, excuse me. And so we picked it up from Brea and moved it into Montana. Had it in Montana for just over a year. And we had 4 employees that went with us from California to Montana. Mm-hmm. And 4 employees come from Montana to North Carolina, and they're still with us.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
US Optics makes mounts. Is it the mounts, or
no,
is it
US
just
Optics
the scopes?
Just builds optics. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just a scope. So US Optics has been kind of known for high precision, long range shooting. Everything's US made. They're one of the last optics company that is US made for certain lines. And so we still hand clean glass in the plant, assemble every optic, test every optic before it goes out. And these aren't cheap optics. These are optics that range from 2,200, 2,300 MSRP all the way up to 3,500, depending on what reticle you're going to put into them.
Yeah.
And so,
and it's also not, it was interesting to me to be at your facility, which is here in like Connolly Springs, just down I-40.
Yep.
How many, 300,000 square feet?
We have 100,000 of manufacturing and 20,000 of office, but then we've got 300,000 of grade level expansion ready to go if we wanted to expand.
Right. And there's a lot going on over there.
There's a lot going on over there.
One of the things that was interesting to me, going really from the part of the plant that was primarily with US Optics and all that, and then the machine part of the plant with Zero Delta where you're building the firearms. But in the US Optics part, there's not a bunch of machines.
Nope.
There's just a bunch of people, and almost like is it a clean room? Like, what do you call that?
Yeah, so it's a clean room. So you can imagine when you're increasing the power of an optic to say 25 times, mm-hmm. A speck of dust goes from looking like something you can't see at say 3 power to the moon at 25 power, and so. The reason why we have that clean room is any type of dust that gets in there can be an issue. So when we hand clean the glass, they go right back into a container. Most everything in there still stays in a container. We transfer product in and out of these different air vaults that you have. So you're really keeping the contamination out, and it's a positive airflow. So there's always air moving through it and pushing it out the floor. So it's really actually hard to get something in without it being maybe on your clothes. You're always going to have a little bit of that, but that's also why we clean everything under microscope.
Everything by hand.
Yep. Yeah. Everything by hand.
Yeah. So your optics, you went from looking at just doing optics to now, I think it went to the mounts and just how all that fits in. And the name Zero Delta, did that start out as a firearm primary. It started out as the mounting structure for the optics. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that was when we.
I read about that. I thought that was really kind of a cool way to
when
put
we
that.
acquired the rights to build these various optic mounts. We had to come up with a name because we wanted to rebrand it, and so that's what we came up with. Because the point of the mount is you can take your optic on and off your rifle, and it is guaranteed to return to zero. So you imagine taking your optic off that you may have spent 20, 30 minutes zeroing, and taking it off and then having the confidence that it's going to go right back to zero.
Right.
And so zero delta, zero change, that's kind of how the whole thing came up. And then we just came up with something flashy and cool looking. And that's in the firearms and optics industry. You got a lot of crazy names out there, but you also a lot of people that know the crazy names. And so,
yeah. And you got to market it.
And you got to market it. Yep.
Right.
So we had that in Lubbock, and we were manufacturing all the mounts in Lubbock.
Okay.
And we actually started everything up here first, and that was the last piece that we moved into the plant up here. So because we needed to continue to manufacture them down there, and so we did, and then moved all the equipment back up here.
So part of what attracted you guys to North Carolina was a lack of facilities, of actual structure, building structure that you could expand and do all those sorts of things. Even though I know you had to make a lot of kind of what was the improvements or whatever. I know you've done a lot of improvements. What was the specs you were telling me about where you're storing some ammunition in the building, but you can't just put that like in a closet or in a regular room?
Yeah, so that was actually one of the biggest projects we did. So we actually built a complete ammunition line. And so the back room, you have all these various requirements as far as how much powder you can have in, how many primers you can have in. It's always got to be next to an exterior wall. We got blowout prevention, all the lighting, electrical is explosion proof. Static flooring. I mean, that room actually cost us a ton to put together. So we put the ammunition line in, built the ammunition. It's strictly governmental, and obviously we haven't.
It's not retail. It's not
retail. And obviously we've not really been in too many Eastern fights right now, and so we do have quite a bit of ammo sitting there. But it's But yeah, from what you're saying, yes, you have specific mags that you have to house primers, to house powder.
Like how many pieces of sheetrock on the
Oh, yeah, that was for the 3-hour
wall?
firewall. Yeah, so we had to put 6 pieces for a 3-hour firewall. And then after you laid every piece, you did one wall basically. You had to have it come back and inspected. Then you do the next wall.
For all 6 of them.
Yeah. And so that was super fun. And that part of it was the first project that we really worked on in the plant and getting everything ready. We obviously had a lot of the machining stuff coming in, but we had people working on that while I was kind of working on the machining side of it. And
so how big of a jump is it to go from your interest in U.S. optics and then acquiring U.S. optics, not primarily, but with a focus on the mounts and just the machinery of that? I mean, just the complexity of that. I mean, it's a unique system that mounts.
Right.
And then you go, well, we can make all this other stuff. I can make medical devices over here. I can make parts for oil and gas industry over here. Why don't we make firearms?
Well, and so machining a part is machining a part.
I know. See, most people don't think that, though.
You got to have...
Like, you think that because you've been doing this since you were like 17 or whatever. But,
no doubt. But Pat was in the industry already. I mean, he was moving, back in 2016, he was moving over 1 million parts a month.
Okay.
In the firearms industry.
Okay.
And so he really wanted to have a little more control as well. Kind of goes back to Jerry and Bob back in the day, like, hey, they're buying everything, and really kind of wanted to have the keys to the kingdom where, when the market gets really, really going, the big guys are going to suck all the supply up, and, Pat or us would be sitting there, wishing we had a machine to make them on, because one pin and you're not making it could be a 9-cent pin, but if you don't have that specific pin or that specific widget, you're not putting either a gun together or an optic together or whatever it is. It's just the requirement of manufacturing. So we acquired Warsport, which was they were a firearms manufacturer out in Eagle Springs, North Carolina. And so they had a lot of equipment. They made barrels specifically, and they were building ARs. And so we acquired that and brought all that equipment in as well. And then patented a pistol. We had Pat had an idea, and he basically sent it to me in Lubbock. And then the light bulb went on, and we had like 3 people in the room and said, all right, it's not leaving here. And that was what we created, the Modulus. So Modulus is done well. We ended up getting patents for it. So
now, what's different about that? Because that's a pretty unique firearm.
It
or
is
system, I guess.
It is. So you can basically go from, say, a compact pistol to what we call a duty pistol, which is a size pistol that a police officer or military may carry, to what we call like a race gun, which is something that a guy might run a 3-gun competition in, running as fast as he can, maybe shooting a little bit longer distance, so he needs a longer barrel, longer slide. Basically, you can go between all 3 of those with one serial number, and by just changing a couple different parts out and putting your whole slide assembly back on.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to do that in the past, you had to buy 3 firearms. So now you just buy our compact pistol, and then you buy what we call a conversion kit. So you get the slide, you get the pieces that convert it to the next size, and off you go.
Which, by the way, you're not ordering from some other place.
No,
you're building them right here.
Every one of them.
Around the corner.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the slide for it right there.
Oh, yeah. So that's a good, for the people who are listening, you won't be able to see this, but I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, we're right there. So, this is the slide that you machine in the shop there. And this is the CNC type of machine. But this piece comes from
that giant hunk of steel.
What is that? Is it steel?
It is stainless steel. And it's pretty hard right now. So that's why you see that kind of colorish tint. Is we basically buy an annealed bar, send it out for heat treat, and we actually machine it in the heat treated condition.
Okay.
So
it's not moving. It's not going anywhere.
That's correct.
No matter how many rounds go through this, it's not.
That's correct.
Going to change its.
And that's the reason why we do that.
And you were telling me about, you mentioned earlier about the size of the hair on our head and how precise you need to be. Well, now this is not a widget in an oil and gas pump or part of some sort. This is a live firearm.
That's a live firearm.
So how specific do your parameters have to be to do something like this?
I mean, within tenths. So when I say, 3 thousandths of diameter for your hair, I mean, we're holding 3 tenths on this, so 10 times less.
Okay.
So for this particular part, we actually, when you're really having to hold that tight of a tolerance, you actually have to grind it. So you grind it with a giant rock to get to that, because if you can imagine turning it with a standard turning tool or a piece of carbide, one, it doesn't stay flat. Now, you might think it's flat, but you can look at it under a microscope and you can see little microwaves in it. And
really?
When you have sealing surfaces, when you're having gas pressure moving this back and forth, it's really critical.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of one thing I would say that we kind of pride ourselves on, was that, we don't cut any corners. And so when it's what it takes to make it, we utilize the equipment, what it takes to make it, and the processes.
So you and Pat start this thing,
Mm-hmm.
kind of together start it, right?
Yep.
Who else is involved in kind of the leadership structure over there?
So now it's just me, Pat, and Chad, who are the owners, and my partner in Lubbock as well.
Right.
And then Mac is who you've met, 25-year-old retired colonel. He's our COO. And then we've got, I had one of the engineers, actually my engineering manager out of Lubbock, moved with me. Texas boy, Been in Texas, really had the team, still has the team dialed in Lubbock, but there was really no reason whether he's here or there. And so he works for 50% of my Lubbock plant and 50% of the plant up here. But he'd been in West Texas all his life and just, kind of wanted a scenery change. And so he moved his wife, him and his wife up here, and their first child, two children, and they've had another one up here. So he's got 3 kids.
Okay.
He kind of likes to be outdoors. So, with the mountains and everything by it, Lubbock, unfortunately, is as flat as this table. And, you got to drive to go do something, several hours, not just, 30 minutes up the road.
Right.
And so Tim's been with us up here as well. And then we got another engineer who moved here from Montana. Actually, he wasn't the original part of U.S. Optics, but he ended up coming to work for U.S. Optics in Montana, and then he moved his family, him and his wife, out here. So there's a lot as far as, people that have been different places to kind of put this whole team together. Everybody was brought in. Pat was the only one native, not really native North Carolina. He's from San Diego, but
just being out here,
living in Fayetteville.
So how do you, when you started this thing, who dictates the culture? Who dictates kind of the type of people you want to hire, the type of work day you want your employees to have, like the sort of benefits that you offer? I mean, is that a plan that's just something that is inherent to the work you've done in the past and it just sort of carried over? Or is that something you have a broader conversation about? Do you have sort of a template? Like, how do you approach that? Because, starting a company, it's one thing when you know all the manufacturing details and you're like, oh yeah, I know how to make this work. But then now you're going to be hiring these people and moving families out. How do you get that culture side and just sort of understanding that structure?
Well, so when we started moving out here and, yes, we had a plan. We had a task list, 200 items, 300 items deep, with deadlines and things of that nature. And a lot of the beginning was just us. Because the plant really had to be almost completely redone on the inside. And so there was a lot of, that first 9 months was really just planning everything out and getting the plant. We repainted the entire inside, all LED lighting. The office had, unfortunately, some people had got into it and beat the windows out and beat the sheetrock out, and roof had to be completely replaced. And so, we had water inside of it. So it was a big project just to get the plant kind of back to code and standard and what we wanted. Then after that, it was, all right, you imagine bringing in all this equipment in. You got riggers and you got electricians and everybody just to get it up and going. Lathes are leveled. Probably, a good rule of thumb was 1 machine per day, and then 2 or 3 days after that, just getting it set up. So, 4 days, and, we've got, good grief, probably 52 CNCs in there now, something like that. And a lot of it was planned projects, though. Obviously, the pistol was kind of the first one. We brought very specific machinery in for the pistol.
Right.
While we're continuously working on the ammos. But more to answer your question, it was pretty much a team effort on all that. There wasn't somebody just saying, no, we're doing it this way. And that's actually what's made the 3 of us work really well together. We may have our differences as far as our ideas, but at the end of the day, it was, a decision that we jointly made, and everybody was going to support it, and you didn't waver from that, and you never looked back. And we still work it to that day. Obviously, it wasn't all roses in the beginning. Whether the market was down, we kind of started that company in the most down firearms market you could have.
So, I want to touch on that just a little bit. It's interesting to me. I'm not a gun guy per se. I like guns, but I'm not like a collector, and I'm not an avid shooter or any of that sort of stuff. But when you say it was a down market, Why was it a down market?
Well, a lot
Is it
politically.
all politically?
A lot politically, yeah. I mean, there's numbers all over, but when Trump was elected, I mean, there's numbers, and we kind of agree with the numbers that the firearms market went down almost 76%. I mean, it got slow.
Because the assumption is under that kind of an administration,
Second Amendment's covered.
yeah, anybody and everybody can buy and sell, and there's plenty of supply and easy access and all that. And then now we've seen a new administration. With the same
standards, though. I mean, it's not.
Sure.
Yeah, it's still very strict standards on releasing weapons into dealers, and your whole transfers of FFLs and then to the end user. I mean, none of that changed. It was just the comfort that the Second Amendment or any of those bans weren't going to occur.
Yeah, and some of that is a conversation you and I had the other day, that it's a bit of a misunderstanding, and obviously so much of the information that's being pushed our way these days has a particular agenda or spin on it. But a lot of people don't understand that. That's a whole nother podcast. But a lot of people don't understand some of the discussion around Second Amendment and around specific legislation per state and all that sort of stuff. So that's a whole nother thing. But it is a little bit of sort of reactionary marketplace where when people feel like they're going to be more restricted, then all of a sudden you guys are going to do better. You're going to benefit from that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. When it really kind of picked up earlier than the election, to be real honest. A lot of it, I think, started with the riots, and then into COVID even. People were concerned. Nobody been into a global pandemic.
Right.
And I don't know if it's so much security. It was just, hey, manufacturing is going to be down because
manufacturing is going to be down.
Manufacturing's down. I mean, people are just we're closed, you know, and so I think it was a multitude of things that really kind of picked this whole industry back up. But we actually knew that, which was kind of the crazy thing. We knew that we had to build it during that time frame, and so we spent the time when it was down to get everything ready, kind of for the next
ramp it up,
next cycle. You never know. Just like the housing market. I mean, I don't think anybody knew the housing market was going to be as crazy as it is right now.
Right.
It's all businesses. I mean, we're heavily involved in the water industry in the Texas plant, and if it's raining in the United States, you're not selling pumps. But when you have droughts in various states, I mean, the pump industry just goes through the roof, and you can't predict Mother Nature. You can have the best plan you want, and all of a sudden we have the wettest year, and everybody's pump business is 30 or 40% off.
Right. That's kind of wild to think about too. Sure. Yeah. So one of the things I like to ask this question. We've got a lot more that we can cover as well, but one of the things that we talk about with guests, I can't imagine the capital required to make some of the changes that you've made, and all the financing that's involved in that. And I'm sure you've had a number of dealings like that kind of help put things in place, and whether you're careful about how leveraged you are otherwise. But what is one of the I'll ask you, what's one of the worst financial decisions that you've ever made, or worst piece of financial advice that you've ever been given? And it doesn't have to be business related with this necessarily, but I always find that kind of an interesting question.
It's an interesting question. So I'm gonna kind of answer it with back to the 28, 29, 30, 31-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And I don't guess I really understood what a personal guarantee was until I really understood what a personal guarantee was. And so it wasn't the fact that I made a bad business decision, but when you said, you just gung-ho, ready to go, kind of when I really understood that, especially when I had, I got married and then had my first child, a lot of that kind of set in. And so I don't know if I really had a particular worst. I mean, everybody has 100 of them they could probably talk about. But the thing that probably put a lot of fear in me was, all right, now I have another person in the family I have to take care of, and things, better get to humming in order to continue to support that. And so I would say the fear kind of set in where I don't know if I really necessarily changed things, but I understood really how important it was, and it was kind of a real growing up experience per se.
Yeah, that personal guarantee thing is real.
It is real.
It's not.
It's not something you mess with.
No.
And but I guess when I was kind of younger, it was like I'm going. This is the only way I can do it. Off we go. And it's kind of the way it's been. But you learn to appreciate things as you get older.
Well, you have an entrepreneurial mind anyway. I mean, obviously, this is part of your makeup, and that includes. I mean, we had a friend on the podcast recently talking about taking risks and that sort of thing. When you're going to start a furniture company here in Hickory, when you're going to start a manufacturing company or build a machine shop in Shanghai, I mean, you're going to get comfortable with some amount of risks. But it seems like you're also very focused on kind of the details and the process. Do you have, you've mentioned some of the guys from your past, were those guys all mentors for you? Do you get advice? Do you read a lot? Like what are the things that kind of give you guidance in some, or have, or maybe still do give you guidance in some of those decisions?
Man, I've had a bunch of mentors. Actually, Jerry, the J&J&B, is still alive. I talked to him every now and then. Obviously, Bob was a big part. Bob was a big part of my life when I was growing up. And that was tough losing him. I was always at his house in the evenings. We'd work till 8 or 9 o'clock and be like, "Come on, I'll cook you a cheeseburger." And you'd still sit there and talk shop. Or he wasn't afraid to say, "Hey, don't do that again."
Yeah,
or,
right. Right.
"Hey, let's think about this before you say something," and things of that nature. And just those small bits helped me tremendously. In the early days, yes, I would read, and my wife still makes fun of me because I would be picking up a textbook or something I could learn from rather than reading a mystery or a murder mystery or things of that nature. I read quite a bit when I was younger, and now I don't know. I guess you could say you kind of had so many experiences, but you don't ever stop learning. So and I would say it's more manufacturing related than more process and understanding, the financial side of it, the marketing side of it that I was really kind of reading up on. It's more of every single part you build or every different manufacturing process is something different. It's unique. And kind of pinning those down is what I've really, probably focused more on. Or, just we kind of got things up and going, and it's allowing us to kind of branch a little bit and start looking at a few different things and allowing us to kind of do something different and not necessarily sit back, but we have a team. We did what we wanted to from a process side of it. The plant's up and running. Of course, you have your daily issues, but more of an executive style management now where you've got, Mac running the business and different managers under him. And so it makes it easier for, let's say, Pat, Chad, and Matt and I to be gone for a couple days and not have to worry about it, where that wasn't an option a year and a half ago.
Yeah, well, and that's why you did the work then,
right?
Was to get to the place where it can be an option now. I mean, that's what you guys have put in place,
right?
What is maybe the best financial decision you've ever made?
I'm going to say advice.
Okay.
I think some of the best advice I've given to like some of the younger people that have worked for me, that just came in and talked to me, was more like build your assets. I've always been a guy that's like, you're putting $600 or $700 in rent. You need to be putting $600 or $700 into a mortgage, or go buy something that's going to cost you $300 and put the other $300 in fixing it up so you can continue to grow that equity and build that up. And no matter what it is, it could be a $400 truck that you could sell for $5,000 by putting some of that money into it rather than just, kind of almost flushing it down the toilet.
Yeah.
And probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do is explain to people about retirement in a 401k.
Why do you think that is? That's really interesting.
Well, so we started a match in Lubbock, and so we started a percentage match. So if the employee put in so many, we matched it dollar for dollar.
Okay.
And I thought, man, this is going to be the coolest thing.
It's the best thing ever.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. Everybody's going to be super excited about it. We announce it.
They're going to write you thank you notes and everything.
Yeah, we announce it and get zero participation. I mean, zero. It was all, and it wasn't all management either. It was machine shop guys and, night shift and whoever. And finally I was like, yeah, we got to have a company meeting. So we had a company meeting and took a $20 bill out. And I said, this is what happens when you don't put this money in here. And I lit it on fire. And I was like, you're literally just taking money and throwing it in the trash.
Yeah.
Because that is something that you can have later for yourself. It's not costing you anything but that money that you are, but it's going to help your family later. And I think I got like maybe 2 or 3 people after that. That was it. And so
I think it could be kind of an industry sort of thing. I mean, there's some industries that it clicks. There are others that it doesn't quite as much. And it's interesting what with Eric Fulcher, who started the Design Foundry, a furniture company here in town. It was a challenge rolling out a 401k for them. It's a brand new company, just started, but you hire all these people who've been building furniture for years.
Right.
They know the deal. They've worked in this industry, in this business for a long, long time. But now all of a sudden you roll out this kind of a benefits package, and we had to do a tremendous amount of education. A lot of meetings, a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of really understanding exactly what you're trying to say. That look, if you can, I know it's going to take out of your paycheck. Right. Okay, we're aware of that. But if you can just take, this 3% is all I'm asking for you to do, then the company is going to match. So you're $10 now, it's $20. Like that's real dollars.
Real money.
Real money.
Right.
And it's a real benefit. And that is a challenge to kind of get that across to people. And that doesn't even get into the compounding and if you invest well and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So that's interesting. So you've had now same sort of situation when you came here and started and put US Optics and Zero Delta together?
No, we're still, so we, like you had mentioned, they're all separate. They're completely separate businesses.
Right.
I mean, so if Zero Delta buys an optic from US Optics, literally a purchase order is going to them.
Right.
They're walking the optic over. We're actually receiving into that system. You have a bill, so on and so forth. And so we're still on the growth side of that with that company. I mean, we got the medical and everything, but we haven't got into the retirement piece of it yet. Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of walking before we run, in which we did in Texas as well.
Sure.
And it's just a business growth. I mean, we've had to use, it took a lot to get it up and going, a lot. And now it's, as the company grows, you're utilizing more cash, and you're having to hire more people, and you're having to spend dollars to hire people.
Growing pains.
Yeah, whether
literally.
it's Indeed or staffing agencies or marketing or whatever, even just to get people in right now.
Well, and you guys are obviously ramping up all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, for those that are kind of tuning in, you guys have a great web presence and social media presence and all that sort of stuff. I know we're kind of running long on time, but I wanted to kind of circle back with Zero Delta. You have your Modulus system, which are your handguns. You also have rifles that you make there as well.
Correct.
And what else?
All of our mounting systems.
Okay.
And then we sell a lot of components. So another company that's not even on here is another company called Unbranded AR. And so that's our parts business that we sell to dealers all over the country.
So is any of this retail oriented? I mean, it's
all of them are retail.
All of them are retail. We can go to your website, pick out the specs that we want for firearms, match it with the right kind of optics.
Yep.
And in this case, know that it's really going to marry well together because that's the way it's built.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's kind of what makes us unique, and that was kind of part of the plan. Was most gun manufacturers just sell a gun. They don't manufacture optics, where we have the optic, the mount, the rifle or the pistol. And so, that was kind of the big thing that we put together was when we created our whole Ready Series line, every gun comes with an optic on it automatically. Right. And not very many companies offer that. I mean, there's really only 1 or 2 out there that do that. And actually, a lot of them saw us doing it and said, all right, We better start doing that as well. And we were kind of the smaller guys, so it was kind of neat seeing some of the bigger guys taking on some of the. And who knows whether it was us or not, but it's fun to see the industry kind of change.
So when we look at that facility out there, it's not just manufacturing. You also have indoor range, outdoor range, because you've got to test and
correct
quality control and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. I saw something as well about some of the training. And when I mentioned that I'm not like a gun guy necessarily, my only hesitation just personally with firearms is just a lack of training.
Yep.
And in that, I speak for myself, but I assume for a lot of other people, when I went to get my concealed carry permit a few years back, there was easily half of that class has no business ever carrying a firearm, as far as I can tell. But that was where the training sort of stopped. But you guys have some of that in-house as well.
We do. And it's more of, it's not per se, okay, Saturday, July 17th, we're having a class. It might be you and 8 of your buddies say, hey, like you and I've talked about, John, I'd like to, understand a little bit more about it, get more comfortable. And then, from that, you can even kind of build on that. So it's not particularly structured. We'll get, whether it might be law enforcement come in, buy some weapons. We do training with it, add on to that.
And you have that happen right now.
Yeah, we
quite
do.
Often.
Yeah, we just did one a couple weeks ago. Mac did, and so it's available. It's out there. If anybody that goes on the website, there you can call in and say, hey, we're kind of interested in this, and we can put something together.
That's great.
So,
yep. All right, man. Well, thank you again for
you're welcome.
Taking time to share some of your story. I feel like there's just a whole lot more that we could get into, and a lot of different tangents and rabbit holes we could go down, and we'll save that and do that over beer sometime soon.
You got it
as well. But anyway, so for everybody else out there, thank you for tuning in and joining us for the podcast. Again, go Spotify, YouTube. You can get all the information on our website at seretirementplanners.com. Be sure to like and subscribe and let us know. Give us some feedback on that. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks for being here, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member of FINRA, SIPC. Southeast Retirement Planners is not affiliated with LPL Financial or registered as a broker-dealer or investment advisor.